Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, June 16th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you, and we've got a guest right off the top, senior writer covering the Giants for The Athletic. Andrew Baggarly is here because the Giants acquired Rafael Devers on Sunday. Words that I did not expect to say out loud in year two of a 10-year contract extension for Devers, but here we are. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, sure. Great to be on with you.
It ends up being a 5-player swap. Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks, James Tibbs III, the Giants' first rounder from last summer, and Jose Bayo all going back to Boston. But the first question I have for you is, how much better are the Giants today on Monday than they were just 24 hours ago with the addition of Devers?
Well, I think they're quite a bit better, and they really think they're going to be better after Matt Chapman comes back from a sprained hand, which they think is going to be, shortly before the All-Star break. They have a position player core that is just absolutely locked in now. I mean, they're taking on 8.5 years of Devers' contract at more than $250 million, a little of it deferred. But then you stack that on the $151 million 6-year deal that just gave to Matt Chapman last September, the $182 million 7-year deal they gave to Willy Adames in the offseason, which at the time was the biggest guarantee they made to one player. Obviously, Devers is an even bigger one. And all of a sudden, this is a group that's going to be together for a long time. And then you got Jung-Hoo Lee is still in year two of his 5-year, $113 million contract. So it does definitely reduce their future flexibility. How this group sort of ages is going to probably determine whether the Buster Posey era is a success or not in large measure. But it took some gumption to make a deal like this, to take on everything and give up the talent they gave up as well. But if you understand the Giants, if you understand how difficult it's been for them to get a world-class offensive force in the middle of their lineup, whether it's Aaron Judge, whether it's Ohtani, Bryce Harper, getting Giancarlo Stanton to waive his no trade. He said no to them. I mean, I think Buster Posey knows the score. He knows the history of this organization. And even though he's all about pitching and defense, and he basically, bought himself 8 years of a DH, he knows what it means to have a force in the middle of that lineup too, and how difficult that is. Maybe the most difficult thing to obtain when you're sitting in that chair as the Giants president of baseball operations. So took a lot of gumption and probably a little bit of trepidation, but they got it done and got it done where he can hit for 6 weeks for them before the trade deadline even comes. And who knows how many games that might impact.
I'm fascinated by the just the difference in the front office, because there's a lot of the players in place were put in place by the Farhan Zaidi front office. And yet this is kind of the big deal that we couldn't see Farhan kind of close. And so I wonder if, the best way to see forward for this Giants team seems to be like, hey, have these processes that were put in place by Farhan, have these sort of analytically based processes, have this, hopefully good player development that he was working on, have all that, in place, but then have Buster have like a better sway with the ownership group. Like, is there something there where like Buster they were like, oh, this is Buster and we trust him, and like, yes, we'll give you the money you need for this deal?
Well, I don't know about that, because I do think that when Farhan Zaidi was really empowered, he was pretty carte blanche. I mean, he hired Gabe Kapler, which was not popular. And there were probably a lot of people who had to basically go, well, okay, we put this guy in this chair. We hired him. We believe in him. He's saying this is the right guy to manage. And, I don't think Gabe Kapler was really a great fit as manager, the one great year aside that they had in 2021. You look at, they were ready to sign Carlos Correa to a $365 million contract, or 350, whatever it was. And so, that was, whether that was driven by Farhan or ownership, is something that sort of stays in the C-suite. But, clearly that was a big move that they were prepared to make with him leading the way. And he was all in on Yamamoto. He was a big fan of Yamamoto. They were ready to basically give him the same contract he got from the Dodgers, and he just didn't pick them. Same with Ohtani. So I think there was a lot of trust in Farhan. He had the wherewithal to make the big moves, but there is definitely a risk aversion or risk calculation, and there were a lot of critics of that regime who thought they were just a little too risk averse. And clearly, you are taking some risk here, both in terms of the financial consideration, and maybe to a slightly lesser extent, dipping into that pool of pitching and sacrificing Kyle Harrison. And, this is really the one shot that Buster Posey had in terms of financial flexibility, in terms of what they have to offer in terms of prospects and players in the system. This is not a robust system, but he was able to get a big bat without giving up Bryce Eldridge, who is by far the best prospect in the Giants system. They still have Hayden Birdsong, who probably I would imagine a lot of teams would have preferred Birdsong in this deal over Harrison, and they still have Carson Wisenhunt at AAA, and they're going for it, and there's a lot of confidence. There's a lot of confidence that goes into making a move like this. You're basically saying to yourself, okay, yeah, we're locking ourselves in to this core of players. That means it's going to be even more incumbent upon us to develop smartly, to draft smartly, to be able to plug in those more economical components around these guys who are going to be taking up a lot of the payroll. And that's Buster Posey saying, look, we'll figure out how to do it. We got a lot of smart people working here. That's having faith in the people that are around you, and that same confidence to take on Devers without even talking to him about what position he's going to play, how he's going to fit. There's just a belief that, we're just going to be transparent. We're going to be honest. We're going to go about things the right way. We're all going to be adults in the room, and it's going to work out because this guy is a pro and he wants to play every day, and that's good enough for me. So a lot of confidence, self-confidence, and self-assuredness went into making a move like this.
I like the idea that they're being less risk averse, that, because you can see, and this focus on confidence, because you can see like the Willy Adames deal, that was stretching the amount that people thought he was worth. Like in some ways you could call it an overpay. However, they liked a lot of the things that he did. He fit a position that they needed with offense. And they've not wavered in their support of him. There's, I think they're mostly just like, he's going to come out of it on the other end of this and he's going to be fine with him. I think in a similar way, there might be some really big ups and downs on how people think of this deal, and they might come quickly. Like if Kyle Harrison goes and has 2 or 3 good starts for the Red Sox, they've won the deal, And if the shoulders come back for Devers, and there's something wrong with the shoulder or he slumps, they've lost the deal, So I feel like, I would be eating a lot of Tums. But getting that bat has been the hardest thing for them. It doesn't even matter for them position wise. Just get that bat.
Yeah, that's what they've been looking for forever. I mean, that one of the first things that Buster Posey said when he took over in last October was, we're in the memory making business, and as much as they believe in pitching and defense, Barry Bonds made some pretty darn good memories for fans here over the years. And really, even through winning the 3 World Series championships, there's always been this undercurrent of Giants fans being like, when are we going to get the big bat? I mean, I still think about the complaints when they didn't sign Vlad Guerrero Sr. and the Angels signed him. It's going back that far to where there's been this sort of this unrequited kind of hope within the fan base that the Giants would go out and get a real difference-making offensive player, and they got one. They just got one. He's 28. I think you look at he's leading the league in walks. He's someone who if he could be like a Joey Votto into his 30s and be a guy who gets on base a ton and hits homers, and I mean that would be huge for this franchise. Bob Melvin was saying he likes the way that Devers sees the ball deep. He can hit the ball with authority the opposite way. We're going to see how that plays when he doesn't have a green monster to pepper the out there in left field. But and it's always a challenge to come here and hit the ballpark. Gets in every hitter's head, whether you're righty or lefty. But you know what? You take some pressure off yourself when the guys around you are performing, and the Giants just got a lot deeper. Wilmer Flores has got 51 RBIs, and he might be an extra guy now. Dom Smith was off to a really nice start for them, but they're not going to necessarily need to give him 400 plate appearances the rest of the way. So yeah, they definitely got a lot deeper, and they needed to, because this was a pretty shallow position group.
Thinking about where they're at payroll wise, and given the amount of time we have before the deadline this year, it does seem like there's plenty of room to add more. So what do you think the Giants would pursue as far as other upgrades to this roster? This feels like an all-in sort of move, not just for this year, but beyond this season. So what other upgrades do you see them going after?
Oh, totally. Yeah. When you take Jordan Hicks' salary going the other way, and you prorate them both down, the Giants basically added about 10 or 11 million to their payroll with this trade for this year. And that still keeps them under the projected to be under the luxury tax threshold. It's 241 million, I believe. And they were of the mind, and ownership basically said, look, we're going to be open to every opportunity. And if there's places we can strike and it makes sense, we'll do it. But, our by and large preference is to reduce the payroll from where it was last year and get under the tax and reset, the penalties, which, frankly, those penalties are going to be onerous, especially when you have to develop. I mean, you have to, nail your draft picks. You have to have as much money in your bonus pools as you can have to try to replenish the system. So, I would be a little surprised if they made a move that would take them over the luxury tax this year. But, they are on a case by case basis. And it's a little bit of a open question what their biggest need would be after getting Devers. They certainly still have rotation depth, starting pitching depth. Some injuries can change that real quick. And I think probably the best answer to your question is we got 6 weeks to go till the trade deadline. So there's plenty of time for other needs, other injuries, other things to happen that would change the calculus for just what this team might need to further push it over the top.
In terms of what they have, the old the best acquisition at the trade deadline is a call up or an injury return. What do you see them doing in the short term and the long term in the rotation? And do you think that there's any chance that Eldrige takes some time in the outfield? Just because I wonder, just strictly speaking, by Fangraphs depth charts, right field is probably the weakest place going forward. But it's probably first base still if Devers is going to DH. But I just wanted to know if there's been any chatter about him and sort of what the chatter has been about the top prospects that are ready to come up. Like, is a Whisenhunt going to come up and take Verlander's next start if he can't, or how close is he, and what's going on with Eldrige?
Yeah, well, Verlander is going to start in the Cleveland series, I would guess on Wednesday, if not Wednesday, Thursday. And so Kyle Harrison was probably going to come out of the rotation regardless. Now, Landon Roop was leaking some oil here in his last start, but he's been up and down. I think Hayden Birdsong looks really, really good. And if I do think there's going to come to a point where they'll maybe swap out Roop for Whisenhunt and have him make his major league debut, if only because Roop is already at 75 something innings, and unlike Birdsong, who started in the bullpen, or Harrison, who was in the bullpen for a while, their innings are a little better managed at this point, and I don't think they want to run Roop into the red innings wise. So I do think he's going to get a timeout at some point, and that's probably when we'd see Whisenhunt. They've got Carson Seymour, they've got Carson Ragsdale, all the Carsons. They have all the Carsons in the minor leagues. So yeah, I think they still feel good about their pitching depth. And what was the second part of your question? I'm
just
sorry.
Eldrige, if he's ever played in the outfield, and how close he is to coming up. I mean, the two soft spots on the depth charts are first base and right field.
Yeah, it's probably a little early. We got to find out what Rafael Devers is open to be honest. That's probably the number one piece of information that we don't have right now. It would be objectively hilarious if he's playing first base next week when the Red Sox come to San Francisco. I won't lie. That would be that. I mean, isn't this crazy? A trade as big as this is, it's a huge story for the Giants because of all of the reasons we've gone into and all the history and unrequited hopes of getting a big bat. And it's a huge story in Boston for all the drama of, they traded Mookie, they let Bogarts go. This is the guy they extended, and barely a year in, they can't see eye to eye, and maybe they mismanaged, the communication there a little bit, and all of a sudden they're moving on from their punting. I mean, it's huge. It's so dramatic, and it's such a different story on both sides of this trade. But for Eldrige, it is interesting. If Devers is a full-time DH, that makes it all the more important that Bryce Eldridge turn himself into a functional first baseman. I think that is where the focus is going to. Yeah, I think he's going to continue to work at first. I haven't heard anything different. Again, it's early. I'd be a little surprised if all of a sudden they said to him, "Okay, yeah, let's try right field again." But you're right in terms of the depth chart. What they've gotten out of first base is not good, and obviously they moved on from Wade Jr. And then in right field, there's still a lot of belief that Mike Yastrzemski brings a lot of value with his defense. I think he got overplayed a little bit the first couple months. I wasn't around to watch every day, but that's what I'm hearing. Bob Melvin did start him left on left a little bit, which probably didn't work out so well. But then he gave him a couple days off, and Yastrzemski had a nice series in Colorado. So if they can maybe mix in Gerard Encarnacion and he starts coming around, he hasn't really had a chance to pick up any rhythm yet after missing all that time with a broken finger. That may be what they do, and maybe there's going to be something out there that makes sense at the deadline. I thought Jarren Duran was the Red Sox player that made the most sense for the Giants. And I even speculated that in a trade deadline piece a couple days ago. But I guess they were talking about a different guy, at Fenway Park.
It's hard to believe because I think it was the first week of May. It was after the Cassis injury when Devers didn't want to go and play first base upon request from the front office. And I messaged Jen McCaffrey and I said, is it possible they would trade Rafael Devers in year 2 of a 10-year extension? She said, he doesn't have a no trade clause. So yeah. And here we are a little over a month later. And it actually happened. Wow. So I thought it was Galaxy Brain fantasy guy questioning there. I didn't think there was any reality to it whatsoever. And it is amazing that the Red Sox will be in San Francisco this weekend. Here's what I want to see. I want to see Devers start a game at third and make a really big defensive play there. I want to see him start a game at first, just so we can all laugh about that. And I want all 3 things in one series. I'm asking for way too much, but that's what I'm hoping we see in that 3-game series this weekend.
And let's have Pablo Sandoval come and throw the first pitch out too, just to
let's go.
I could see Devers having a different approach to what he does with the Giants than what he did with the Red Sox, just because this is a blank slate for him. Maybe he does regret some of how it went down with the Red Sox, but then also it's not like they're asking him, "Oh, can you play first base because our first baseman is injured, and so we just need you there for 3 months, and then you go back to DH." Right? This would be hopefully be more of a, "Hey, can you be our first baseman for the next 5 years?"
Yeah, the whole drama is
question.
It's interesting, and you know what? I can see both sides of it, and at first when it started coming out, I thought, boy, this guy's not a team guy. They have a need. It's not like, they just didn't get a first baseman. They had a first baseman. He got hurt. He's making all that money. Don't you have to kind of suck it up and be a leader for the team? And then I read Kenny Rosenthal's piece where he really went into, the lack of communication that went into before the Bregman signing. It really reminded me of how what I thought was maybe the biggest failure of the Farhan Zaidi regime was how they handled Brandon Crawford when they were about to sign Carlos Correa. They didn't even have a conversation with Brandon Crawford about moving him off a shortstop, where the guy's won Gold Gloves and he's best shortstop in franchise history. They were ready to sign Carlos Correa and move Brandon Crawford to third base without talking to him. So, if that's sort of similar to how it went down with Devers, then yeah, you can't blame him for being upset. Let's show the guy some respect for having the stature that he has in your franchise. And there's probably a little bit of misgivings on both sides, things that could have been done differently or more professionally. But it is a sort of a fascinating thing to dissect a little bit, because I can see people coming down reasonably on both sides of no, Devers was selfish, or no, the Red Sox were disrespectful. It's probably the truth is somewhere in the middle, like most things. But it's just sort of an interesting thing to kick around.
Well, it's the first time we talked about the deal on the pod, Andrew. Probably won't be the last time we talk about this blockbuster trade. We appreciate your time and your insight and all the great work you do at The Athletic.
Hey, thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
It's Andrew Baggarly, senior writer covering the Giants here at The Athletic. And it's hilarious, too, that Grant is on vacation as this happens. So, Grant's probably happy, right? Grant's got to be overjoyed by this.
Yeah. I think it's just a great deal that kind of, I hate to be like win-win, because if I had to choose a side, I would say I think San Francisco did better in this one. I find Kyle Harrison to be a fungible sort of 4-5 type starter. Hicks is a decent reliever. But to give them that up in a teenager, or he's 22, but like to give that up in a bat that's not a top 100 prospect for a top 20 hitter in the game like Devers, I'll take the Giants side of it. But there is this whole thing like you come on and your predecessor has signed a huge deal to a guy that is now a DH. They signed him to a third baseman deal, and you come on and you have 9 years of DH in front of you. And you're struggling to put together pitching. You don't want to necessarily clog the DH position when you have other guys. So you want to unlock your roster and you want to make yourself more, versatile and able to take trends and able to pick up the right free agent and make the roster fit better. Like I get it. But I'd say there's lots of ways they could have unlocked that roster. There's lots of other players they could have traded. There's lots of different ways they could have gone around it. So, and for the Giants, it's just like you said, like Devers never would have signed this deal with the Giants. But so they had, that was the cost. The overpay instead of money this time was they had to pay prospects to get this deal. But if they could sign Devers right now to $280 million, or $250 million in 8 years, I think they would. And I think he wouldn't. So
that's the problem, right? They keep finishing second and third, targeting big bats in free agency. So this is kind of the other path if you're Buster Posey. And it's exciting that he pursued it, which is probably a function of the division they're in too. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. The Padres with AJ Preller at the helm are an aggressive club. If you're going to compete with those two teams in particular, you're not going to do that taking a middle ground, overly patient sort of approach. And we know the cost of doing business in Major League Baseball is overpaying in free agency. That's just how it works. If you want to improve the roster that way, you're not going to come out ahead in dollars per WAR on a lot of those deals. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at this trade. I mean, the Devers, how does he fit in the park question? I think Bags kind of nailed that. The key difference for me is not having the monster in left. Like, does he lose a little bit when he goes the opposite way of being outside of Boston? And if anything, does he actually gain on the pull side with the move to San Francisco, or does that end up being kind of neutral from a power perspective for him?
Well, we've got the overlay up right now, and it looks beautiful. It looks like, hey, he's going to hit more homers. But the problem is that temperature is the big difference here. Whereas Boston's just about to heat up into the summer months, San Francisco is going to stay the same temperature. And so some of those balls just aren't going to go as far. And so, that changes your entire overlay. But I would say that Triple's Alley in San Francisco is remarkably close to the most problematic place in Fenway, which is that weird cutout in center field where it gets really deep, right? That's the hardest place in Fenway to go out. So Whatever he's been doing, he's been not trying to hit it to Triple's Alley, where we're in San Francisco. So maybe he does have, it's either down the line or it's to left center. That might actually work in San Francisco. I just think he hits the ball so hard. He hits the ball so hard that he can hit it out of San Francisco. What kind of a haircut are you giving him going forward?
I mean, if you look at the 3-year rolling park factors for lefties and you just say, what's the home run park factor? Fenway has been a 90, so 10% below league average, and Oracle's been a 78, so 22% worse than league average for power. So you're talking about 2 to 3 homers maybe a season, like based on 81 games at home and all that. And eventually, maybe as he hits the ball less hard, it hurts him a little bit more than it hurts him because he's still kind of in that physical peak or near that physical peak right now. So it's a couple of homers. Maybe is it 8 to 10 points in batting average, not having the monster as a lefty going the opposite way? That's like back of the napkin math for me.
If you put together the worst parts of what he's done so far and just sort of say that's what's coming, it would be a 263 average with 27 home runs.
It's good,
basically.
Really good.
Yeah.
And it's a very tough thing to do in that ballpark, as we've seen for a long time. So if he can do that while playing half his games there, then that's good.
Does hurt his fantasy numbers a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
You
and
were
also
hoping
the quality of the
for
supporting
290
cast.
and 30 plus, but yeah.
But the supporting cast is better than it would have been in the last several years, too, for all the reasons that Andrew mentioned, right? You have Willy Adames there on the long-term deal. You got the Chapman extension. Jung-Ho Lee's healthy right now. So you put that group together with Elliot Ramos and with the guys that they already had that were coming through that system. And it's a much better looking lineup. I mean, entering this week, they're 21st in WOBA. Not surprisingly, 23rd in slugging. So the Devers move could probably get them closer to league average in both. Would it surprise you if here on out the Giants are middle of the pack in WOBA and near middle of the pack in slug?
Yeah. Which would have, of course, insinuate that they were better than that, after the park factor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think they'll be a pretty good road team. If you think of what the lineup looks like, I think it's a pretty good lineup. In terms of your holes, you're talking about Tyler Fitzgerald and Wilmer Flores as your worst bats. You're starting to put together a real lineup.
I think the thing about the Boston side of this that has to be frustrating, it's not that you couldn't possibly see it coming, because if you look at the timeline that Levi Weaver outlined, it was last winter, Devers was critical about the lack of spending. And then this year they add Alex Bregman at his position and, the fallout of him not wanting to play first base. Like, again, I'm with Bags where I think this was poor communication, and generally, you can kind of come down somewhere in the middle on this one. I think that's a reasonable stance. I think the Red Sox were wrong. I think at the point where they asked him to play some first base, even if he didn't want to do it, Devers could have done it. It was a choice. He made his choice. That's what it is. I think it's just weird because it goes back to the what are you going to use the money on now question, right? You were the team that didn't retain Mookie Betts long-term. You let Bogarts go. You trade away Devers. You got all this financial flexibility, and the timing of the trade's extra weird just because the Red Sox are playing well. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they swept the Yankees this weekend.
And they're still $30 million. But what they had Devers, they were still $30 million under the first apron.
Right.
They had money they could have spent.
I think this was more about Devers and the front office and Breslow not being in charge of baseball operations.
That's not a good way to make decisions.
No. It's not.
Like emotions.
Most of what you're trying to do as an organization is to find and secure, as long as possible, players that are as good as Rafael Devers. That's
right.
The goal, generally, of what you're looking for to build a championship caliber lineup. I think when you put into context that, they offloaded the contract, and if that was really important to ownership or to the front office or both, then you can look at the return and say, okay, they achieved their main goal, flexibility. And secondary to that, they got Kyle Harrison, who they'll have for a long time. Jordan Hicks, who will be better if they move him back to the bullpen. James Tibbs III, who was a first rounder last year, was having a good season at high A this year. Looks like he could be a quick to the big league sort of player. Not that they need another outfielder. Maybe he's the guy that gets flipped into the trade. And then Jose Baez is kind of a long-term dart arm, even though he's got a 40% K rate in the complex league right now. That's the problem. He's in the complex league, so we don't really know a lot about Bayo at this point.
They were interviewing Clayton Kershaw during the game about this, and they said something about, and they got James Tibbs, and Kershaw goes, who? And they're like, oh, he was a first round pick, and he goes, no, I don't care.
Well, there's plenty of stuff in this world that I'll disagree with Clayton Kershaw about. Obviously, go back to Friday. But look, I look at this and I'm like, okay, you are trying to win at the major league level. That is the number one objective of a front office. And when you do things like this, like the Red Sox just did, I think it's really hard to say, we're trying our best to win right now. Because unless you think Kyle Harrison's like a mid-rotation starter or better, or you really believe that Tibbs is going to change the long-term outcome of your franchise, either directly or indirectly by being traded, and that Hicks is going to be in your bullpen in October, you have to spend the money somewhere. That's the point. You're Boston. Like, you're a big market team. You've got deep pockets. You need pitching. You put together the board of top free agent pitchers that are available this winter. Are you better as an organization if you go plunk down a 9-figure outlay on Framber Valdez this winter, or you do the same with Dylan Cease? Because those are probably the only two guys of the available free agents that I could see getting that. Maybe Michael King, health permitting, kind of fits into that group too. But
this is actually, I think you're leaning towards no, but there's actually a part of me that's like, maybe you are. And this is why Boston has been able to develop hitters. They seem to be doing a really good job of it. Roman Anthony's start notwithstanding. It is a park that is going to be conducive to producing hitting, and they've had a really hard time producing pitching. So maybe the whole idea is, yes, we can have that $30 million on the books for veteran talent. It just would be better if that $30 million was spent on arms, because that's what we need. That's what we need to buy in free agency, because we're having a really hard time developing it. So maybe they think, yes, we would rather have Framber on a $25 million a year, $30 million a year, 5-year deal, 6-year deal. I mean, what's Framber going to? Framber might get that, right? He might get $200 million.
I would say Framber comp and free agency, Max Fried money.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe fewer year. I mean, say Fried's already 31 though too. Yeah. I mean, I probably maybe one year shorter, but probably a similar AAV.
Well, some of the Fried years might have been to stretch out the AAV for luxury tax purposes or whatever. So I don't know. Like, I'm thinking like a 200 or something. You know, that's less than Devers. First of all, I guess it's shorter than Devers, and it just addresses something that they think that they can't produce. Yeah, I mean that. I'm trying to be as kind as possible to them. And they're like, we'd rather spend that $30 million on pitching, basically.
The other take is just that you've put yourself in a position where you feel like front office and player are never going to be able to mend that relationship. And you might as well trade Rafael Devers while you still can, because eventually, 10 years of service time, he'd have a no trade clause. He'd be 2 or 3 years older than he is right now. Like, all of those factors would be in play. And I think the way that this really could go poorly for the Giants, if I'm trying to just remember some things that we cared about even 3 or 4 months ago, the health of Rafael Devers' shoulders. I mean, you brought that up. Like, he was so limited in what he could do throughout the winter and even into the spring that was an explanation that Jen McCaffrey gave us to say, hey, this is why Rafael Devers probably hasn't been himself to begin the season. The slump he opened the year in was awful. We're asking all sorts of questions like, is he healthy? Is he okay? What happened? Physically, that's the question. Like, are his shoulders going to hold up? Otherwise, I think he'll age reasonably well, and the money doesn't matter that much to a huge market team like that when you struggle to get players like free agency anyways.
You don't think he can be like a top 20, top 30 hitter for 4 years until he's 32, 5 years until he's 33? I feel like
then just be passable for some of the years at the end. Like,
and so you have 3 bad years. I mean, how many bad years are going to have in the Bogarts deal? How many bad years are going to have the Machado deal? Like, you're always going to have bad years at the end. Even the Votto deal, which was pretty good, was not great at the end. You know, like, there's
just how
no
time
deal
tends to work.
No deal is great in the very end, and this one doesn't actually seem that much worse. And 8,250 is going to be chump change. I mean, you just saw 770, and we saw way bigger numbers than this one. This is actually not that big of a number. Like, Bogarts is actually do more money than Devers, which just is crazy. So, and then the last part that I find interesting is Kyle Harrison. He's definitely going to a park. Part of where I had him ranked, a large part of it was park. I don't actually think this is a great set of skills for a starter. So I have comps for him. You can use the comp machine on Alex Chamberlain's thing, and you basically take his fastball and say, who are the comps for his fastball? And you see it immediately. Look at all of their arm slots. Andrew Haney, Sean Manaea, JP Sears, Kyle Harrison all have arm slots around was it 20 degrees let's see here, 27. Yeah, 25 to 27. Manaea, of course, has dropped his a little bit. So I wonder if Manaea is what the plan is for Harrison. If they're going to drop him and try to have him be sinker sweeper, because he does have the same, what these guys all have is low slot, high spin efficiency. So a bit of a surprising four-seamer from all these guys. If you think about it, Sears, Haney, Manaea, Harrison, they all throw four-seamers. They're not really sinker guys. Manaea with the drop slot has become more of a sinker guy. So maybe they think they can drop his slot and get it and make him more just crazy east-west than he is. But the other thing that makes all these guys the same, again, Haney, Manaea, Sears, Harrison, none of them have good secondaries. There isn't a good secondary in the group. Sears sweeper might be the best, or Manaea sweeper, but I would say that none of these guys have an above average secondary, period. None of them turn over changeups that well. None of them have good breaking balls. This is a fastball heavy thing, and we've seen that Haney and Harrison at some point was like 92, and then it didn't work. And he just popped up to 95 this year, and it's working. What happens next year when it's 93 or 94? So I want to leave a little bit of room for a Manaea-esque outcome for Harrison. But when 3 out of the 4 comps are kind of mediocre pitchers, that's what I think is coming for him.
Right, and I think that generally is why I'm looking at this return and going, I think you could have got more for Devers, but maybe the failure in that thinking is that the list of teams that will take on that much money for any player is reasonably short. And if you're working against time, you're worried about the shoulders, you're worried about losing leverage, whatever it might be. Do you want it to
come back out? Do you want it to
You don't want
out?
this to come back. Yeah, and that'd be your third massive misstep in communication as an organization with this player. Like, maybe that was part of this too. Is like, let's just get this done, move on. But what you do with that money is going to be a huge, huge part of how you're graded long-term on this, because at least on the surface, it doesn't look like you did great.
And actually, just to think about what you were talking about, like limited number of people that could take it on, 2 of the biggest teams that maybe could take it on, the Yankees and Dodgers, pretty much don't have space at DH.
Yeah, well, the Dodgers, I mean, like, you can't. You can't, because you got Shohei Ohtani,
right?
Who it actually is coming back to start Monday's game.
So who else were they talking to? Mets?
Yeah, you probably could have talked to the Mets, but then you're also going to, long term, like, you're going to have Soto and Devers on the same roster. Like, one of those guys is going to play the field 4 or 5 years from now. Like, you kind of see both of them as
Mets might have said no.
At the end.
Mets might have said no.
Maybe. Yeah, we'll probably learn a lot more about all of this in the weeks ahead. But Shohei is back as a pitcher, before the All-Star break. And I think some of the stuff I was reading from Fabian Ardaya, who did great work throughout the weekend, it seemed like the Dodgers got a little cagey about when exactly Ohtani was going to return. And all of a sudden it was like, surprise, he's coming back Monday to start. He did throw 44 pitches in a simulated game last week, but they're insisting that he'll throw between 1 and 2 innings as an opener against the Padres on Monday. I don't think I believe anything that they say right now. I think I'm just going to wait and see. Like, would I expect Shohei Ohtani to go 5 and be eligible for a win? No, not based on 44 pitches in his last simulated game last week. So I do think it would be a shorter outing, even if they're.
You have to choose between hitting him and pitching him. I guess you choose hitting him.
Yeah, in leagues where you got to choose until we see him get all the way back to a full starter's workload. Yeah, you just keep hitting him.
It's exciting for him to come back, and for the Dodgers to, potentially get an impact starter. I mean, Roki Sasaki, despite the fact that he's supposedly pain free, has just stopped throwing. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. I think back to, I got a text from one of the people that was at the bar when I drunkenly told everybody this offseason that Roki was going to be a bust. He's like, I guess you were right, dude. but what's weird is, does that mean that, like, he's got to like rethink his mechanics completely, or does Pain-Free doing a lot of lifting here?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of confidence in this situation right now. I am increasingly pairing what we're seeing this year from Roki to his past injury history, which is significant, and worrying that he will need some kind of shutdown, despite what the Dodgers say, like some kind of prolonged surgery and recovery. Like that seems like the direction that we're heading in. And this is, in the face of some good news with Ohtani, and you get Blake Snell throwing side sessions again. Apparently Emmett Sheehan's coming back this week. It's wild in
what is
Dodgerville
the
right
September rotation for the Dodgers?
Oh boy.
I bet you Kershaw just throws 87 and has some blow ups and isn't vintage, but just he's there.
He's okay. So we've seen Kershaw for parts of the last 2 seasons now. His Sierra's over 4.5. The K rate's under 20%. Walk rate's creeping up this year. He's not getting as many swinging strikes. At some point, it's not rust anymore. It's just fading. It's time catching up with you. And I kind of think we're getting to that point. Like we're just,
oh my God. Like I don't think he's a playoff starter right now, which is the conversation I don't want to have with Clayton Kershaw.
No. But if you think about it, if you're the Dodgers and you just go historically, the ways they just grind through September to then shorten up that roster accordingly in the playoffs, Kershaw could be chewing up innings in September and be nowhere near the mound in October. Like that's in the range of outcomes depending on who else is healthy.
You could also just quote unquote start Kershaw without having any conversation with him and be like, well, you put like 3 guys on in the second, so we had to take you out. Right? Let's just pitch him as long as it's working, and then as soon as there's any sign, you just take him out. So I think Yamamoto, I mean, he could go down is the thing. Like he had a major injury last year, so it's hard to be like Yamamoto will be there, but Yamamoto, Kershaw, like Glasnow or Snell,
they could both be healthy by then.
What if when everybody's healthy, then they have weird decisions. Like, I guess you just put Gonsolin or May in the bullpen again.
Yep.
Jeez. I like nice. Ben Kasparius, dude. I think he could be a really good starter, and I want to be like, everyone go get Ben Kasparius, but I have no idea how long he'll be around. I like Ben Kasparius better than Emmett Sheehan, actually. I like his fastballs better than Sheehan's fastball.
Right. But Sheehan's part of the guys who will get us there group, at least to the middle part of the season while they get healthy. Like, limitations being whatever they are going to need some healthy arms to kind of bridge this gap through the middle of the year. Yeah,
the probables grid over at Fangraphs has been updated to reflect what Andrew Baggarly just texted me, which is it is officially now Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander, and Logan Webb for the Giants in the Cleveland series. And the Dodgers, I've listed Ohtani for Monday. That might be, is that Ohtani Kasparius or Ohtani Linack, maybe? Roboleski? Matt Sauer for Tuesday. Matt Sauer broke a record for number of runs allowed by a reliever by the Dodgers or something when they just let him die on the vine against the Padres that day.
Oh, I think 9 runs on 13 hits.
Yeah, they just
111 pitches.
You're saving the bullpen today, sir. And then Emmett Sheehan on Wednesday. Emmett Sheehan's next start is at Colorado. They're just putting Emmett Sheehan in as like a regular member of the rotation, which is interesting. So I guess my take is maybe incorrect. At least that's what the probable says, and it says Sheehan over Kasparius as a regular starter. So that's something to watch.
Yeah, man. I think the Kasparius interest picked up in the last couple of weeks. He gets scooped up in a bunch of leagues, understandably so, but there's a lot of uncertainty about how exactly they're going to use him. So much injury news and promotion we didn't get to yet. Jeez, like where do we even go from here? Jackson Merrill on the IL with a concussion.
Yeah, it sucked.
That play was brutal because if you didn't see the video of it, there was a throw from Gabriel Moreno, I believe, was behind the play. And Ketel Marte had to come off the bag to get it and get the tag on. And basically, he caught the ball right in front of Jackson Merrill's head first slide. So as soon as Merrill came through, he just made impact with the glove hand, and both, I think Marte and Roldo Perdomo were waving for the trainers immediately. It just looked like one of those complete accident fluke type plays that unfortunately is going to knock Merrill out for at least this week. I mean, it's a 7-day concussion IL situation, but possibly longer. You could just tell he was immediately uncomfortable
Groggy,
on the field.
Yeah, he was like lying down. Yeah, it sucks. I mean, this has been so far a lost season for Merrill. I don't think that there's any process thing that went wrong. You had a choice between Jackson Merrill and Jackson Chourio in the second round, and you could have chosen either way, and the guy could have been hurt. It's we don't have a history of injuries with Jackson Merrill that we have to contend with here. I don't think there's nothing about the way they play the game that suggests that Merrill should be hurt and Chourio not. So I think they're going to both be second rounders next year. Maybe Merrill goes down to the third round or fourth round. I'll still pick him.
Maybe Chourio goes up to the first round. I just want to hear you say it, though. I could think.
I don't know if he's quite there yet. Maybe.
We will have Logan Gilbert coming off the IL on Monday to face the aforementioned Red Sox. And given the nature of the Logan Gilbert injury, a lot of people were wondering, should you actually start him? By the time people hear this episode, we recorded a little later in the day on Monday to make sure we could have Andrew Baggarly on the show earlier. But it's an arm injury. Like, do you blindly trust Logan Gilbert in a 2-start week where he's got the Red Sox for the first one, Cubs, tough matchup for the second one, or do you just let it play out for this week in weekly leagues and kind of wait and see?
I love 2 starts, and there's a lot of leagues where I would just 2-start them, but if I was at all watching my ERA and my WHIP, I would not, because
flexor
you don't even know how many. It's not just the flexor strain aspect of it. It's just you don't know how many innings they're going to give him, how many pitches they're going to give him, right off the bat. So even he could pitch well, and he could pitch 7 innings over 2 starts.
I think he'll get a little more than that, though. He got the 72 pitches for his last rehab outing, so I think 80 plus first time outs within range. It's just a matter of how he feels.
And if the command is off, the command is pretty important for him. So
yeah, that would be the key as we wait for that. But other news and notes include a promotion. Brady House is up for the Nationals. That one broke, I think, early Monday as we were putting this rundown together.
And Lyle.
Yeah, he's back.
Lyle. So they demoted Robert Hassel III and made the choice to go to Lyle. And so what's the corresponding move for House? Who's House replacing?
Oh, let's see. Who is House replacing? Good question, because I wasn't even worried about it because I figured it was someone that we weren't that excited about.
Well, I just sort of want to know what
and they had to make room on the 40-man for him too, I believe.
Let's see. I'm looking at the Washington lineups right now.
Tana got sent down.
Oh, and I'm guessing it'll say Tana played third. Who was playing third? Ahmed Rosario was playing third, and wow, who's playing third? Oh, Tana was playing third. Yeah, so Tana's out, House is in. That's the best way you can make a swap. Is like the guy that he was playing, the playing position that you want him to play is out. This was a good year for House in the minors in terms of power. Probably his best year for power. He hit a ball 112 miles an hour and had a 46% hard hit rate. So that's really the biggest question, because he's not going to be a contact whiz kid. He's not going to be a big OBP guy. So, power is the way he's going to get OBP if he gets it. He's going to scare pitchers if he can do it. It's still a little bit more borderline than I'd like. This is why I don't think he's necessarily a top prospect. But if he can have a 200 ISO in the big leagues, he has a job waiting for him, I think.
Yeah, I think with House, like, the glove should be really good, and that alone could secure the playing time. As long as he's not overmatched, they'll give him some time to work through that swing and miss. And he also hits the ball hard enough, gets to the power enough where if he's a lower average, big power third baseman with above average defense, that works. I mean, in some ways, is that not like early career Matt Chapman? Like, it's probably how we would have described him for various points in his career. I don't know if the glove's quite that level, but it's supposed to be good glove.
Yeah, that's a good point. In terms of like current batters at third base, do we have another type like him? Let's say 200-ish ISO. Ryan McMahon with a better glove. Actually, Ryan
McMahon's not a bad defender either. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
a right-handed version of Ryan McMahon. That could be fair. Like, that's probably your range, with the latter being more likely than the former. But I think House is an exciting player, and his promotion kind of being overshadowed by a million other news things that have happened in the last few days around the league. Unfortunately, Royce Lewis is back on the IL with a hamstring strain again, and it's just like, when, if ever, will Royce Lewis just catch a break on the health front and just get a chance to play even 140 games in a year again? It's just it's frustrating to see the same types of injuries continue to slow him down.
Yeah, it is. It is really too bad. And then he'd just been kind of coming out of the slump a little bit. So I don't know what they're going to do. I like Cody Clements a little bit. I don't know if anybody noticed before, but Cody Clements has upped his bat speed almost more than anybody else in the big leagues. And he had been playing pretty well, and he's still been playing at some at second, some at third. I like him better than Jonah Bride, honestly. And so if they think this is going to be a long absence for Royce Lewis, then I think, go to the guy that you think has more upside in Cody Clements. I think, in terms of offensive upside, go play him a little bit more and make Jonah Bride the backup. I think that's where they're headed. So if you're looking in, I would say 15 plus team leagues, Cody Clements is relevant right now.
Yeah, they've used Bride against a couple of lefties recently, so we'll see how they split out that playing time. But man, if you want to feel old, Cody Clements is 29 years old.
Yeah.
What is happening? Why am I so old? Why am I getting so old so fast? But yeah, the Twins are already playing a lot of Brooks Lee, a lot of Willie Castro, so it'll be one of Clemens or Jonah Bride picking up that extra playing time, or maybe they'll work in a platoon for Lewis's absence. Giancarlo Stanton is coming back in the Yankee series against the Angels. And I saw somebody, I think it was Michael Waterloo on Blue Sky, say, I forgot Giancarlo Stanton was in the league, which, is it's true. You kind of forget sometimes that he's still a Yankee, because he's been out all season with the double tennis elbow, extremely rare injury that I've actually never heard anyone get before. So nice to see him get back after a couple of rehab games. Like, he played 3 rehab games at AA. He'll be activated probably by the time you hear this podcast, or the day after. Who loses, though? We wondered about this when Ben Rice got off to his great start. Trent Grisham had a really nice start to the season as well. How do you see the pieces fitting with Rice, Grisham, Dominguez, and now Stanton coming back to be that primary DH for the Yankees?
Well, as a person who was excited to get Ben Rice in my lineups in the Listeners League early on, I think I've noticed, and I'm checking my math here, yes, he has been in a slide. He had a great March and April with a 958 OPS. In May, Ben Rice was a 739 OPS. In June so far, it's a 405 OPS. I think it could be as simple as sending him down at some point. But he is still left-handed, so they may still use him, and then Stanton against lefties. But that doesn't make sense. I don't think you treat Stanton that way when he comes back in. So, and in his first game back, Stanton is the DH against right-handers. Ben Rice is at first base, and Paul Goldschmidt is on the bench, but that's not going to be the plan going forward. So I think that Ben Rice is going to lose a lot of playing time here.
Yeah, it's interesting because both Grisham and Rice have had prominent spots in the lineup. I mean, Grisham's leading off a lot against righties. Rice is up there playing first base, mostly DH, but the corresponding move, if they option down their backup catcher, might give us a little bit of a hint too in terms of some of their intended usage. Yeah, I think that'll help maybe help clarify things just a little bit. I did see Tyler Mahle is on the IL now with right shoulder soreness. So Kumar Rocker back in the fold for the Rangers. Rocker was among the popular pickups in the main event. We'll get to that in just a few minutes in a very short version of where the money went, because this episode is going to be very, very long if we don't do that. I do want to remind everyone too, this is something we did not discuss last week. We're talking about Jacob deGrom as a possible trade chip for the Rangers. I think it was TPH Noob in our Discord pointed out deGrom does have a full no trade clause. Most players who've been in the league as long as him and hit free agency get that into their deals. He has one, so he would have to approve a deal if the Rangers want to pursue that. And that leads to a whole other wild speculation case. Like, would he approve a deal? Would he want to leave? Does he want to go play for a contender, or is he just happy with life in Arlington?
Yeah, I thought that was a piece of relevant news. That is, I think that reduces the chances of a Jacob deGrom trade. However, the only way that a Jacob deGrom trade happens is to a contender that thinks that he's the piece that puts them into the World Series kind of deal, right? And that might actually be enticing to Jacob deGrom, right? So it's like, if it is, I don't know if the Red Sox count as that right now. But if they went on a win streak and got into the front of that, and we're just a pitcher away, they now have more money available to them. deGrom there makes sense. deGrom to the Yankees and Dodgers always makes sense because they're always looking to add pitching, before the playoffs. So, I think those teams would still have a case to make to him. I think interesting thing for Kumar Rocker is that after I talked to him in spring about how he might need a cutter, he said he just didn't have the feel for it. The last 2 starts, he is throwing a cutter more than a quarter of the time. That is a huge deal because it gives him something against lefties. He can be cutter death ball against lefties, and he can be four seam death ball against righties. His four seam basically has sinker shape. So this cutter for Kumar Rocker changes a lot of how I feel about him. He still had pretty poor locations in his first 2 starts with the cutter in general, but also just all of his pitches. And I do think that's a bit of a potential flaw for Rocker, is not great command, but the arsenal is in better shape right now with the cutter. And so I think he's got an up arrow next to him. Tyler Mahle, it's a shoulder. It's a really bad timing in terms of, the trade deadline. Will he get healthy fast enough to be traded at the trade deadline is a question that might be on some minds in Texas. And he was a huge candidate for regression anyway, when it comes to peripherals like strikeouts minus walks, Sierra, FIP, Stuff Plus. Any model suggested that he was one of the biggest regression candidates in baseball. So maybe you just get out of the regression by putting him on your injured list and not worrying about it.
Yeah, we've seen Mahle deal with a lot of arm injuries over the last couple of years. They described it as shoulder fatigue coming off of his last start on Tuesday. Move was made retroactive to last Thursday, so he's eligible to return before the end of June. We'll see if that's a possibility for Mahle here in the next couple of weeks. Since we were talking about Rocker, let's take a quick look at where the money went. Not surprisingly, big bids on Jacob Mizorowski and Yuri Perez. Ben Kasperios, who came up a little bit earlier, also fetching some pretty big bids in 12-team leagues where he was available, going as high as 190 out of 1,000 in some leagues. Shelby Miller, kind of the number one closer available in a lot of those leagues, topping out at 234. Good luck. Good luck. I hope that works out. But good luck trying to get the bids right in 12-team leagues on closers right now. The range was $11 to $234 on Shelby Miller. But we did get the follow-up that Justin Martinez does need Tommy John surgery. So it's a long runway for the rest of this season for Miller to be the guy.
Yeah, I've been spending a little bit like a drunken sailor. So in my main event, I spent $3 on Liberator, $2 on Luis Urias. He's home all week in Sacramento. I thought that was a fun one. And $1 on Kyle Higashioka to replace Pat Bailey, who was hurt. But I did get a Yuri Perez, and I'm sitting him in his first week. I paid 66 unopposed in TGFBI.
Unopposed. Wow. Well, part of that. So what happens is in the NFBC's platform, if you don't sort by stats, you get sorted by roster rate. And if you have roster rates that are single digits or zero, you're going to be buried well below the fold. So, and it was Father's Day, so maybe you got a little extra lucky.
Maybe I just got lucky. I'm a little mad. I wish I had put like 36 down or something.
I don't get greedy, but I think it's one of those things. Like there's so many Sundays where there's random stuff that pulls people's attention away, right? So there's like Easter that people care about. There's Mother's Day. There's Father's Day. Sometimes 4th of July weekend. So you get all these summer weekends where stuff comes up, and half the league either gets pulled away or maybe more. They're distracted, not as dialed into Fab. It's an opportunity, especially for the players that aren't just popping up at the top of the list.
Yeah, I thought it might be helpful for people who do Fab. My process is that during the week, I'm identifying my droppers. So over the course of the week, I want to identify who I can drop. And then I set up trees with those droppers. And the first thing I do is I go in, and for hitters, I do last 7 ABs, because I want to know that they've gotten at least 18 to 19 ABs in the last week. Otherwise, they're too much of a part-time player to even matter. So that's my first way of doing it. And then for pitchers, I do the schedule, and I just look at the schedule, and I do it 2 or 3 times because they update the schedule, And then sometimes I'll go to the Fangraphs probables and look for people that I might have missed, And then the last thing I do, and I've added this over the last couple of years, I didn't do it at first, and I missed a lot of people, is you can sort by date added. And if you sort by date added, then you can basically look at the last 7 days, and then you can catch all the people who didn't get to 20 ABs because they just got added, right? And so date added is a really good last way to kind of get them. Now, what you'll miss are like injury returnees or prospects that that somebody drafted early and then dropped or something, So there are still ways to miss players, and I always get mad when I miss out on something like that. But this week I was pretty mellow, except for Yuri, and I'm going to keep Yuri on my bench because it wasn't he didn't have any strikeouts in the last one. I'm waiting for the command to come back, and it's Atlanta, so I don't really want to take that chance. So it was a speculative pickup for now.
Yeah, only 4 swinging strikes for Yuri Perez against the Nationals in that second start on Sunday, but still 99.4 topping out with that fastball. So that velo is still there. I think it is more of a command knocking off the rust sort of thing with him. So I understand the willingness to pick him up, but then the reluctance to start him right away. I think a lot of people that added him probably are a little more desperate for pitching than you are in that situation, and will have to just throw him out there right away. I wanted to mention Brandon Walter real quick. He got picked up in a bunch of 12-team leagues, man.
I'm picking him up.
Yeah, a 49-7 strikeout to walk at AAA this year, 19-1 in 3 starts, 17 2/3 with Houston. And right now they're using a 6-man rotation. They've got a stretch of 13 games in 13 days. But you think about the injury histories of guys in that rotation, a couple of unproven guys in there as well. There's a world in which Brandon Walter is just pitching well enough where he keeps his spot, even if they go back to the 5-man.
Yeah, and he's got a 102 stuff plus, 106 location plus right now. The 4-seam fastball, sinker, and slider are all above average by stuff plus, and the changeup is a 97, which is pretty good for a changeup, and the cutter is 89, which doesn't sound great, but it's really important for him to have the cutter as a fastball because the sinker is his best fastball. So 3 fastballs, two secondaries, wide arsenal, good command. 28. The only thing missing is velo. He does not have good velo. But at 91.7, he also doesn't have, problematic velo in the sense that, like, I don't think he could still be good. Yeah. So I like him. I'm picking him up where I can.
The other name that was picked up in a lot of different leagues is Max Muncy, not the Dodgers Max Muncy, but the A's Max Muncy. I found it interesting you mentioned Luis Urias being home in Sacramento all week. I think Max Muncy is going to get a chance to just take the third base job. The strikeout rate's a little high right now. He's not walking yet, but it's his first 113 big league plate appearances. I think he's popped 4 homers now in the last 2 weeks. Just seems like a guy that could become multi-position eligible in a lot of places, but also could take a job and run with it, given the way they've rotated through Miguel Andujar, who's now hurt again. They've rotated through Gio Urshela and Urias. They don't have that long-term third baseman in place. I think there's a much better chance that Muncy is that guy than any of those veterans take that job and keep it all season.
Yeah, why did I take Urias over him? Urias, wow. Muncy's actually hitting the ball harder than Urias. Maybe I messed that up. Just in my head, I was like, Urias has more power.
Well, 7 homers in 57 games. It's a 158 ISO so far.
Yeah, but the max EV is better and max EV, barrel, and hard hit are all better for Muncy. I did not expect that. I will say that the hard hit is almost even. They're basically like 30% hard hit guys. They're not. Neither one of them is a big hit the ball hard guy, and they're both right-handers. So it's really a pick 'em, I guess.
Yeah, I think and they're both being both righties. They can't just split it, and you can't just have this is the lefty. He's going to play more. We're not quite that lucky in this instance, but I think given where they're at in the standings, kind of looking long term, Muncy has a chance, and that's what I like about him for at least deeper leagues. 15 teams and deeper, 12s are a little tricky depending on the schedule.
The hint is also in that Urias is playing second, which is where they have somebody returning from injury eventually at some point, Zach Geloff. So.
Yeah, it's true too. So they can coexist for now. And the Geloff injury train has been a disappointing one so far. It's going to take some more patience, right? I think it was a stress reaction in his rib that came up when he was trying to get back. And that was a pretty big blow because he was actually on his minor league rehab assignment.
He's a grinder. I heard this about like Kyle Teal too, that like they'll just swing and swing and swing and swing forever in the cage. And like people have to be like, yo, chill out.
It's too much. Like you gotta
stress reaction in the rib cage coming back. Like he was probably hitting the swings pretty hard.
Yeah, they were expecting him to go back out on rehab about a week ago, based on the last note I'm seeing at RotoWire. It was a story from Martin Gallegos of MLB.com. Not sure if that actually happened. So we'll keep an eye on that because eventually Geloff could be a nice pickup in the second half of the season if he does get healthy.
The other closer thing that was happening was people buying shares of Tommy Canley because Will Vest's pinky hurts. But I think it's just a pinky.
I think it matters.
You could go on the IL today. We'll know more soon. But actually, we won't know until Tuesday, which is really annoying. So I've basically benched Vest for this week, but I have not invested heavily in Canley.
Well, there you go. So a slightly shorter version of where the money went because there was a ton on the rundown. Actually, a lot of things in the rundown that we're going to roll over to the Tuesday episode as well. So plenty of ground covered today. Thanks again to Andrew Baggarly for joining us to get the Giants side of that Rafael Devers trade, which I do feel like generally if the Red Sox are involved in a move, a lot of the attention is, what does this mean for the Red Sox? And in this case, I feel like the Giant side is actually more immediately interesting since they got the best player in the deal by miles. You can find Eno on Blue Sky, enoceras.bsky.social. I am dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.